started here. First and foremost, thanks everyone for joining. Happy to have you here today to talk about an offering that Fruition Partners has called 5-till ITIL, which in short is an assessment and roadmap offering of the IT service management space, but goes a little bit beyond that we'll take a look at here shortly. Also, have probably a pretty quick presentation for you today. We're scheduled for an hour, but we'll wrap up well ahead of that and give you some time back. And with that, we'll go ahead and dive in. Just to start off, if you're not familiar, just a little bit about Fruition Partners. We are one of the premier cloud service management firms in this space. Currently have over 200 cloud experts, and with our dedication to ServiceNow, have over 325 ServiceNow implementations, and 10 years, actually well over 10 years of direct ITSM-related consulting and service management experience that we bring to further help enable our cloud technology. If you look at kind of the range of our offerings, we start with the ITSM side and the process consulting side, and have numerous offerings in that space, one of which we're talking about today. Our implementation services and platform development around the ServiceNow platform, as well as managed services, both from a technical and from an IT service management perspective. As well as education services and technology partnerships with a number of other firms that would link into technology such as ServiceNow. With that said, let's get into today's agenda. Want to cover just at a high level what is ITIL, 5-till ITIL, discuss the assessment offering, talk about some of the specific benefits that you get, and then dive in a little bit to how the offering actually works and what this program actually looks like as we execute such an engagement within an organization. And then last but certainly not least, what do you get? Really, what is the output of the 5-till ITIL program? And that speaks a little bit to the graphic that you see here, which is one of those vehicle GPSs that we have. And we like to think of this program as essentially GPS for IT. Because really what it's going to do at the end of the day is give you a map to head you in the direction and ultimately achieve the goals that you have in front of you. So what is 5-till ITIL? It's really a rapid roadmap development practice. And there's a number of components to it that get us to our end state of a roadmap of improvements that we can follow. The first and foremost is a little bit of education. Essentially, we start the offering with a very shortened ITIL Foundations course that really is just targeted to do a couple of things. First and foremost is level set the people in your organization on a high level of what IT service management is, and then just get everybody talking on the same page with key terminology so that we all understand as we're talking through having our discussions and doing our discovery, we all understand what an incident is versus a problem versus a request. Just as an example, just some short education to level set the organization and get everybody on the same page. One of the core tenets of the 5-till ITIL program is, rather than traditional assessments that just tend to focus on numbers, we really are aligning the entire roadmap that you're going to get to your goals. So in order to do that, we start the engagement by having a discussion both at the leadership level and at the operational management level about what your organization's goals are. And we actually start at the very top in terms of what are the current primary business goals of your organization. Are you looking to expand? Are you looking to increase market presence? Other things like that. Because those will then filter down into the more specific IT goals that we will talk about and prioritize for your organization, and that way we can line them back up to those business goals. So once we have that goal discussion and prioritize your goals, the other reason that we do that is so that we can not only map the improvements to them, but we can also map some custom metrics and measurements to them, which we'll see more about in a little bit. After that discussion, we get into the actual assessment. So this is where we're doing some deep discovery within your organization about how you're currently operating, what your specific pain points are, and we'll learn about, within the various IT service management processes, how you're doing things, so that we can have that as an input to provide provide back recommendations that'll get you closer to best practice, and more importantly, again, back to operating in a way that's going to allow you to reach up and to meet those goals. And then lastly, the primary output again is the roadmap. The roadmap will be a 2 to 3 year plan depending on your organization, but approximately 2 to 3 year plan for your organization to follow. So if you were to sit and think, gee, I'd really like to know how I get from where we are today to a more mature state, to a more effective state, to a state where our goals are realized, the roadmap is essentially your plan to get there. It will encompass all of the activities that need to be undertaken to increment you to that better state that you're looking for. Important to note that we focus on a lot more than just IT service management processes as part of this engagement. We take the holistic view of the people, process, and technology. So rather than just talking about process flows and process components, we're also very much diving into things like what is the culture of your organization and what cultural challenges might you face as you undertake these improvements and move down your roadmap. What kind of organizational change planning do you have in place? And what do we think will be necessary to be able to be successful in moving down our roadmap and improving? And then lastly, technology. We very much take a look at the technology as well and do a little bit of a mapping of what technology is enabling which functions in your organization. Do a little bit of rating of how effective that technology is, how much it meets the needs of the function we are trying to accomplish, how easy it is to maintain, have a discussion from a cost perspective. So this way we can provide back a complete recommendation set that focuses on the people and organizational aspects, the process intricacies, and then lastly the technology, which will enable IT service management and other business functions as well. So we make sure we give you a complete picture. So in terms of benefits, again, you will be presented at the end of the engagement with a 2 to 3 year plan for steady improvement of your IT organization. Another great benefit is if you look at other assessment and roadmap offerings that are out there in the market, many of them are several weeks actually in duration, which obviously comes with more cost, complexity, and we're complete in 5 days, thus the name 5 ITIL. So we can very rapidly come in and get the same benefit for you in a shortened time period. Another benefit is, again, the targeted metrics to measure your progress. So you get a very customized set of metrics that will ultimately be a set of dashboards for each goal that you have. So once we start intaking those measurements and start gathering the data for that, you can very quickly and easily go look at a dashboard to make sure you're headed in the right direction, or certainly adjust if for some reason that you're not. And really at the core, the most important piece is, again, being aligned to your goals. It's very easy, some other organizations can come in and do an assessment, and they essentially will provide back a boilerplate of pure ITIL, purely academic-based recommendations. We don't want to be academic with this. We want to be practical for your organization. We want to be practical in terms of choosing the improvements that are going to be most effective for you, most valuable for you, and again, are practical in achievability as well. So how it works. First off, before the start of the engagement, we'll just have a short discussion and gather some just kind of pertinent organizational information just to understand how your organization is structured and what it looks like and the size of your organization. And are you completely insourced IT, or are you insourced and heavily outsourced? Just so we understand the environment that we're coming into when we start the assessment. Then we'll start off with that ITIL overview, that short session that we talked about to level set the organization. Then we get into our discussion about goals for the organization and pain points that you are facing that we would certainly as well want to address as part of the roadmap and the recommendations contained within. Also want to get that perspective from the executive level, so understanding the goal setting and priorities and the vision that they have for the organization, so that we can all stay in alignment with where we really want to head as an organization. We then get into process discovery workshops and potentially some separate interviews. And this is where we learn how you're operating, and we learn what's happening in your organization and how your processes work. We also are then having some tool discussions, kind of that mapping I talked about, where we're going to look at the functions in your environment, what tool or tools most commonly are supporting each function. And that will then provide us the information that we need to go off for a day, do our analysis, do our reporting, and write up our roadmap for you. We then come back on the final day and do a couple of readouts of the roadmap and the information that we have found. This is just that same thing in a little bit more detail. It kind of shows the agenda. The other thing that I think that it will highlight is that, and we're already only at a 5-day engagement, but even at that, I think this will show you that we're not too heavy on the needs of resources in your organization. The time commitment from your folks will not be a very heavy time commitment. So we start off the first day with that ITIL overview training, and then get into the executive interview to talk about business goals and IT goals. Starting the next day, we'll do a workshop around goal setting and pain points from the broader project team, if you will. And then we get into our process discovery workshops you see here. The processes that you see listed are not necessarily all-encompassing of what we're going to talk about, but it is the core focus of what we talk about. So starting with kind of our operational service desk and problem processes first, getting into our configuration change processes, getting into some transition here, some service transition here, and then getting into the service level and financial and vendor space to cover off those areas that are just as important as well. And then our tool matrix and mapping exercise. Then, as mentioned, we'll go off for a day, and then we'll come back and we'll do 2 readouts. The first is an executive readout presentation. This is the very summarized version of the most key points, key findings that we have found, and most important improvements we think should be moved forward to have that higher level discussion. We'll then get into a detailed roadmap review. We'll go through our listing of improvements in detail, talk about each one, and what it might mean for the organization. So what do you get? The roadmap is the core of it, and we're going to take a look at each of these elements a little bit here. But so the first thing you do get is you do get a current maturity scoring, based upon how you're operating in your current environment. We have that, and it's informational, and it's a good baseline. But unlike other assessments, that's not the emphasis, because that maturity score number that we provide doesn't ultimately help us a whole lot, other than maybe being able to look back someday at that. So the next big piece that we're more concerned with is the prioritized goals that we have talked about and the pain points that we have talked about for your organization, with the real meat of the roadmap being the next box here, which is improvements. So this is our list of improvements that we provide a great deal of detail around, and we'll look at that just here in the next slide. And then lastly, the customized metric set will be provided back as well, so that we can make sure we're headed in the right direction. So first thing is the assessment scoring. We'll go ahead and based on common industry models and maturity scoring, get these numbers out for your organization. Then we get into the more important part of the roadmap detail. And this is just a very quick sample of what this looks like, but we list the improvements out, and we list them in a number of phases. So you can see some crawl phases here. We split the improvements out in a crawl, walk, and run format. So phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, if you will. This is important. Obviously, we can't achieve everything we want to do right away. But there's also dependencies sometimes between improvements. So we may not be able to do one improvement until we get another one done. So crawl, walk, and run helps us do that. And it also provides a sense of achievability. If we were to just put a laundry list of improvements out there, it's kind of this big gob of stuff to do. It's one of those things where people start to lose interest because it looks overwhelming. We then list each improvement in detail. We provide a value statement about each improvement. So it's really kind of a business, a miniature business case, if you will. What are we going to get out of this? Why do we want to do it? Why is it important? We then provide guidance about actually achieving it. So rather than just list an improvement, we want to give you guidance and hints and tips and tricks that we have used over and over and over again through ITSM improvement plans to help you actually realize that improvement. We then list the category of it. So is it people, process, or technology-based improvement? Have a quick discussion about the effort, and then we actually map this back to your goals. So any particular improvement might or will help or assist with meeting one or more goals. So we would list the goals that this particular improvement speaks to right here. So it's within this detail that you're going to see the very specific things for your organization that we think would be of benefit. So, is categorization within your incident process effective? If not, we're going to provide some guidance here on how to make that more effective. Are your processes connected properly? Are incidents being related to problems, being related to changes, so you understand the real impact in your environment? Is your change approval process efficient? Do you have appropriate scrutiny around the changes that are going in your environment? Or conversely, which is something that we see quite a lot as well, is do you have too much scrutiny on your changes? Are there too many layers of approval that could be made more efficient while maintaining the safety of the changes? So great detail like that. And then from a technology perspective, do you have incident management hooked to problem management in a single tool? And if not, what should we do about it? Should we consolidate? Should we build an integration between the items? What would make most sense to get us to the desired value from a technology perspective? Or where are there even consolidation opportunities between tools? So all of that rich detail will be in this section of the roadmap and encompassed through all phases of crawl, walk, and then lastly, the metric mapping. So we'll list out your goals. We'll put together the specific metrics that will speak to those goals, and you'll be able to have this list to either gather from your tools or build into your tools if you don't have them already, so that you can get those kind of quick dashboards to make sure that you're headed in the right direction. Mentioned before this was going to be a quick one, and it definitely was. We'll take any questions that we have at this time.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That was great. Like Michael was just saying, any questions, go ahead, feel free to enter those in the question box there on the GoToWebinar panel. So we'll give everybody a few seconds. If nothing comes to mind now, you'll see up on the screen questions can also be submitted to consulting@fruitionpartners.com. Anything related to our process service line or specifically to 5TIL, ITIL. So just to I guess keep things moving in the meantime and give folks some time to think of questions. I just want to let everybody know that recording of the webinar and PDF will be shared as usual, like we always do. Probably considering it's Thursday, probably early next week. So be on the lookout for that. And we should probably have some new webinars posted to our webinar page on our website the next couple of weeks as well. So be sure to check that out often. And I'm looking at the question box here. And we actually have a question, Mike, that came in from Chris Gordon. So Chris, thanks for participating here. So I'll read the question out loud so everybody can hear it. Question is, how do you handle when an executive is defensive about their low maturity level? How do you break to them the bad news of being lower maturity than expected?
Sure, absolutely. And it's a great question. It's something we have seen and dealt with before. And that's why, and especially if we know that we may run into that going in, we'll probably even more de-emphasize the actual maturity scoring. And that's why we do provide it, but we do de-emphasize that, because the way we want to handle that is we want to focus on how we can make that executive successful. And that becomes a message that starts to ring a little bit more clear with them. So by doing some of the improvements that we are offering here, they can find more success in what they're doing, which becomes a here's something. Okay, now I see the value of it. So rather than talk about a low maturity score, let's talk about some of the things that they can do to be more successful. And make them not more popular, make them appear more successful is what I'm trying to say within their organization.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, and Chris, thanks again. That was a great question. And at any time if you feel your question's unanswered or not answered to the fullest, again, feel free to reach out to Mike or the consulting email address up on the screen, and can definitely get into more detail offline. Actually, Mike, and we have another question coming in from Valerie Gill. Valerie, thank you. This is actually kind of ties in, I think, closely to what Chris was asking earlier as well. There seems to be some concern with, the executive level kind of persuasion. So her question specifically is, how do you address a situation where the executive's perception is very different from other staff management interviews in terms of goals, pain points, etc.?
Yeah, for sure. Typically when we're seeing that, there's obviously misperceptions of some sort. So we handle it in a couple of different ways. The first and foremost is, we can certainly present the view from the non-executive side, if you will, within your organization. But the other value of us being there as a consultant is, if we see that to be the case, and we can make that pitch from our perspective, right? So when the message comes from a consultant and outsider saying, "This is what I see," that can help a lot with, maybe at least enlightening them that there is another view out there in terms of how things are. And then the other side of that coin would be, measure. Depending on what specific topic that we're talking about, if we can get any measurements and get any data to support that, then we can take that data back to that executive or that executive team and present that perception. But it's one of the values of having a firm that has done this a lot come into your organization is they get to hear it from someone else rather than hearing it from the folks that they're maybe hearing it from all day. The other thing that we see is maybe they're not hearing that from them, and the communication is just not getting to them in those discussions because of people being afraid to talk to them, or it's maybe only one person always saying what everyone is thinking. So that's really, when we talk about this being people, process, and technology, that's exactly the kind of people aspects that we want to address through an engagement like this. Is let's break down those barriers and be able to deliver that message so that hopefully we get greater visibility throughout the organization.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. And yeah, thanks again to Chris and Valerie for asking some questions there, and thanks to everybody else too for participating. So it looks like the question box went quiet. So I think we're good to close this out and let everybody go. So once again, look for a follow-up email next week with today's webinar recording and the PDF and some more details on the next upcoming webinar. So thanks again to everybody, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Enjoy your weekend.